CVS Pharmacy is a 60-year-old American retail giant with a net income of over $6 billion annually, 300,000 employees, and with almost 10,000 store locations throughout the country. It is the largest pharmacy chain in the United States. On August 31st, 2012, Mildred Thomas, a 55-year-old senior analyst with DTE Energy, made a trip to the CVS store. She was trying to find the price for a metal trifold lawn chair that was stacked on the highest shelf. She asked for help from the store's assistant manager. But unfortunately, the manager accidentally pushed one of the chairs off the shelf, landing on Mildred's head, resulting in her going to the emergency room where she was eventually diagnosed with a cervical disc herniation and a traumatic brain injury. She was permanently disabled from her job where she had worked for 18 years. In this insider-exclusive network TV special, Justice in America, CVS and Mildred Thomas's story, our news team is on location in Detroit, Michigan, visiting with Mildred's trial lawyer, Bobby Raitt, founder, Raitt Law. He will tell us how he successfully won a $4.6 million verdict for his client, Mildred Thomas, as he takes you inside today's legal system, examining his strategies, his client's thoughts, and in vivid detail, showing you the often heartbreaking stories of cases like Mildred's. These victims could be you or me one day, and if you are so unlucky, you will quickly find out that justice in America is a hard-won battle where very few defendants ever do the right thing, and you need experienced and passionate trial lawyers like Bobby Raitt and his law firm who wage these battles with their own financial resources to get their clients justice. This is the Insider Exclusive, live from Detroit, Michigan. It is my great pleasure to introduce Bobby Raitt to the show. Welcome to the show, Bobby.
Thank you for having me.
Tell our audience a little bit about your firm. What do you guys specialize in?
Various forms of personal injury. When someone's injured, whether it's in an auto accident, slip and fall, dog bite, construction site accident, they can call us, and we have a lot of years of experience and do the various forms. The only thing we don't do directly is medical malpractice. We work with some attorneys that do a great job with that, though, as well.
Mm-hmm. We are here today to discuss a case of your client, Mildred Thomas. Tell our audience what happened to Mildred.
Mildred Thomas was in her early 60s. She was visiting a CVS drugstore. She was trying to price one of those aluminum trifold chairs you see with the multicolor rubber wrapping, and she couldn't reach the top shelf where they were to see the price. She asked for some assistance from a CVS employee. The CVS employee came over, and as Mildred was looking on the lower racks, the CVS employee went to grab the chair. She lost it. It came and it hit Mildred in the head. She was dazed. She didn't have any visible signs of injury. She thought it was best to go to the hospital. She did that. They diagnosed her with a bump on the head. And in the following days and weeks, she started to have some what we know as normal symptomatology of a head injury. And eventually she got to my office and we talked, and I explained some things to her about head injury because I had a practice at the time, as I still do, of a lot of head injury patients/clients. And eventually we had to try that case for various reasons.
Yeah, and let's talk about head injuries for a minute, because whenever you mention a head injury, you know, a lot of these cases boil down to one expert against another expert. Your expert that you hire and the expert that CVS hires, okay? And obviously they're saying there's no visible signs of a head injury, and that's what I want to get to. There are, just like soft tissue injuries, right? There can be very evident issues, with a traumatic brain injury, a person could have, half their head shaved off, or you can't see anything, but a person can't do the things they used to do. What exactly were Mildred's brain injuries that she had?
Well, it's interesting because from a defense perspective, or in this case, CVS perspective, this was an easy one for them. They had a diagnosis in the emergency room of a bump. They didn't have loss of consciousness. They didn't have vomiting or nausea. They didn't have any type of significant problems in the emergency room. And they had an individual in Mildred Thomas who wasn't running to the doctor every day, who wanted to try to keep her job even though she couldn't do it the way she did before, who has experienced problems in her regular everyday life that most people with, the misnomers, we call these mild traumatic brain injuries, because the person doesn't have paralysis, the person doesn't have neurological deficits and things. But a mild traumatic brain injury can have significant symptoms with it. And they did in Mildred's case. But she wasn't the type of person to let on. She wasn't the type of person to complain. So in her case, her biggest symptoms, and most of the time in mild traumatic brain injury, these are those: headaches, dizziness, blurred vision, the inability to multitask, memory, concentration. Those were the biggest ones. And in Mildred's case, she didn't go to the doctor a whole lot. She did document the problems she was having on a fairly irregular basis. And that was what she lived with for the first year or so after the accident. And then when I had to get involved more, because it was apparent to me that they weren't taking these injuries seriously, they being CVS, I visited her home, because I have always thought that's the best way to really know what someone's dealing with, to meet with the family, to see what they are in their environment. And, I would always talk to people about that. But this was one of the first times I felt I have to get to this house, because I have a client that's telling me that she's having some problems, but I get the sense that she's not letting on to what she's really experiencing.
How long was she able to work after the injury?
She went to work for several months after the injury. They sent her to a company doctor. The doctor was a neurologist, said there's really very little wrong with her, that she could still work. But her doctors were disabling her, and she just couldn't deal with the injury anymore. She had worked for Detroit Edison for 18 years at the time. She had a great employment record, and it really bothered her that she couldn't do this job and had to take off, and eventually she did, and she never went back to that job, ever.
So you kind of mentioned some of the problems in the case that you were facing, and the fact that she wanted to keep she didn't really want to admit that she had these problems. Furthermore, she was the perfect person for any premises liability case where someone isn't running to the doctor, right? Doesn't show any visible signs or symptoms, right? Easy to beat them. But that wasn't the case here, was it?
No, it's interesting because, first of all, you use the terminology premises liability. We fought very hard to make this a negligence case, and we fought off some legal actions trying to make it a premises case.
What would be the difference, and why was that to an advantage?
Well, a premises case in Michigan at the time had with it a lot of defenses that CVS could have used in this case. A common negligence case did not, and this was that. It was simply negligence of the assistant manager in failing to properly observe this chair and work with the chair that caused the injury. So we fought that. We fought it on appeal later and won that too. So this was a negligence case. The uphill battle for us was, and always was, that we had someone, she probably had a total at the time of 12 doctor visits. And she probably had a few $1,000s in outstanding medical. But when I visited her at her home, and I sat with her 94-year-old mother, and I sat with her sister, Sharon, who the audience will meet, who is a prosecuting attorney in one of the counties here in Michigan, and I talked to her about her inability to ever drive her grandchild to school as she had done before because she kept on missing the exit. How she almost burned down her kitchen because she kept on forgetting to turn off the stove. How she had to live with sticky notes throughout her home. I looked at her and I said, I am so happy I visited with you. I understand now why you don't want to take the offer that they're giving you, and I will try this case for you. And we went to trial, and the witnesses that we used, her mother, her sister, And quite frankly, the assistant manager from CVS, along with Mildred, made the case. I always say that the two best things for a case to successfully resolve are a plaintiff who is deserving and a defendant who screws up, who does something wrong, who aggravates the jury or whoever's evaluating the case. And in this case, CVS aggravated the hell out of the jury, and my client and her family were outstanding. They just told the truth. They were very likable and unbelievably deserving.
And you got a verdict, substantial one, $4.6 million.
And to be honest with you, the jury gave me almost double what I asked for, which isn't often the case, as you can imagine.
No, it's amazing, and that's the good thing. We have jury verdicts, right? I mean, juries to do that, right? Because they can figure this out. It was appealed, obviously.
It was appealed, and it came back from appeal. The appellate court thought that most of the verdict was accurate and valid. There was part of the verdict that was for future medical, and the jury gave us a lot of money for that, and the court wanted it to be sent back down to the trial court to have a hearing on whether that number was consistent with the testimony and the evidence. Mm-hmm. We never got to that point because we ended up resolving the case, but I should say that shortly after the verdict came in, I got a call from a CVS in-house attorney. He labeled himself the head of their legal department, and he said he wanted to resolve the case. And he told me, Mr. Raitt, listen, I think we both know that this verdict was ridiculous. And that's not the way you want to start out when you're trying to resolve. Sure. He said, I'd like to resolve this case with you. And I said, well, what are you thinking, given your opening statement there? He said, I would like to pay something in the magnitude of what was discussed before the trial.
Which was what, like 200-some thousand?
The verdict was 4.6. The amount the judge was trying to encourage us to take at the time was 280. She ended up, the judge, able to get 300, and that's what Mildred said. She said, I prayed on it, Bobby, and I don't think that's worth anything near what my injuries are worth. And that's when I went to her home. So I told this guy from CVS, I said, you didn't spend a minute in that courtroom. And for you to say this is a ridiculous verdict is offensive as hell to me and my client.
You told him that on the phone.
And his comment to me was, Mr. Raitt, I will be turning on lights and turning off lights at CVS forever, whether you take this money now or you take it later. Well, that guy was fired because of that conversation. And 2 months later, I get a call from his replacement, who is a much more congenial guy, a much more reasonable guy. And he said, why don't we wait to see what the appellate court does? And eventually, when the appellate court came back with that decision that we had to go to the lower court to figure out some things, he and I and my client agreed to a number. It was 2 point something. Yeah. And to be honest with you, with present value numbers and things that your audience, might not understand, it wasn't that far off the verdict. So it was a really good resolution for probably one of my most deserving clients I've ever had.
Yeah, well, they are definitely good people. One last question, because this is an area like soft tissue injury, traumatic brain injury. What do you recommend to anyone who has been struck in the head or whatever? What should they immediately do?
It's interesting. I received a call 2 days ago from a woman. Actually, she sold me a couch, and I gave her my business card at the time. We talked, and she called me and said, Mr. Raitt, I happened to be in an accident the other day. I don't know if you remember me. I sold you your couch. I said, yes. She said, well, so I bumped my head, and I have some headaches, but I'm fine. And I said, look, you're going to do what you want. I'm simply going to give you the information, but I can tell you, don't screw around with a bump on the head. Right. And I could have told her the story of Mildred Thomas if it required it, because certainly that speaks volumes. She wasn't bleeding. She wasn't,
She wasn't knocked out.
Yeah. And the symptoms came on subtly. And most head injuries, the people around you notice the things first, that you're different, that you're more irritable, that, you're just out of it type of thing.
Change personality.
So I would basically give the recommendation to anyone that strikes their head, anyone that has a violent movement of their head even, that they go get it checked out. They get a CAT scan. Now, most CAT scans, MRIs of mild traumatic brain injury won't show anything because they're looking for a bleed, and there's not bleeds in many of these mild traumatic. That doesn't mean you can't have serious, ongoing, regular symptoms that change your life, and that's what happened to Mildred.
We did a fantastic job, and I want to thank you for visiting with us. Keep up the good work.
I'll try. Thank you.
It is my great pleasure to introduce Mildred Thomas and her sister, Sharon Greer. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mildred, you went through hell and back, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
Just went to the store like any other customer,
Yes.
and chair fell on top of you,
Yes.
severely injured. You didn't want to really tell anybody because you're a proud woman, right?
Right. I consider myself to be a strong woman.
Yeah, self-sufficient, don't help me, right?
Right.
But it came a point in time where you needed help, right?
Oh, I absolutely needed some help.
And as anybody who has never been in the legal system would think that, hey, people or the company that injured you would step up to the plate, right? And be accountable, be responsible. But that's not what happened.
What did happen is that they denied what actually did happen to me. They denied it.
Even though the assistant manager, she admitted that she had pushed the chair off the top shelf,
She would not admit it.
she wouldn't admit it.
She would not admit it. She admitted that chairs fell.
And so you had to get a lawyer.
Yes, I did.
And you get Bobby Raitt.
Yes.
Tell us about Bobby Raitt.
He was down to earth when I went to talk to him. And when I went to see him, he was very concerned about my injury. And he was very personable, respectful, and he treated me like a human being and not just a dollar sign. So that's what I liked about Bobby.
Okay, and let's talk about some of your injuries. What were they exactly?
Well, what started off as a concussion turned to be a traumatic brain injury, which affected my speech, my memory, my balance, my walking, my brain, and all aspects of my life, actually.
And how you had to quit working, right?
Yes, I
At
did.
a job you liked, I think it was DTE Energy, right? You had been there for what?
18 years, yes.
You were planning on being there a little bit longer.
Yes, until I retired, yes.
When you went to court, right? What surprised you the most of the defendant? Their actions, the lawyers that represented them. What surprised you the most? They denied everything, right?
Yes, they did. I don't think it was as surprising to me because I think that's what their goal was, to prove me wrong. But just what did surprise me is that my injuries didn't seem to be important to them. I wasn't a person who had sustained these traumatic injuries. I was someone that was trying to beat them. That's the way they looked at it.
Get jackpot justice, right?
Yes.
Right. So when we talk about your injuries, what exactly changed in your life pattern? What couldn't you do anymore?
Well, I couldn't work. Obviously, I worked on a job where I was, I wrote training manuals, I did training, etc. And I mentored employees and helped employees, and I couldn't do that because I didn't know how to do it anymore. Training manuals that I had written and me trying to do the job, actually had to go back and look at my own manuals to see how to do the job.
How are you today? And if you look back on a manual, have you improved whatsoever?
I have improved somewhat because I do things to exercise my brain. I was always a very analytical person, which that was my job as an analyst. So I do a lot of research on things now. Like anything I want to do, I always go back and do some research. If I want to buy something, I do my research on it and see if it's a good product, all that stuff. But I am not the same person that I once was. And I still, sometimes it bothers me. I try to come to terms with I'll never be that person again. There were some things about that person that I really loved and I would love to do again, but it's just not possible.
Such as?
Such as I was an avid sewer and crafter. I used to make quilts. I started off making quilts for each grandchild as they were born. I had sewing machines. I just bought me this new advanced sewing machine, and I didn't even know how to operate it after the injury.
But that really must have surprised you, huh?
Yes, it did, but it was hurtful to me. It was hurtful that things I loved to do, I couldn't do anymore. It was even to the point of foods that I used to love. I didn't like them anymore. It's like this new person was living inside of me. And I was trying to get to know her. I'm still trying to get to know her, this new person, but I miss the old me.
Now, you have one of your closest sisters with us today, Sharon. Yeah. And Sharon, did you see all of these big changes going on with Mildred?
Yes, I did.
And what did you think?
Yes, I saw the changes in Mildred. She was not the same person. It was difficult for all of us in the family because we're a close-knit family, my mother and my sisters and Mildred's children and grandchildren. And she was not able to participate in activities that she used to participate in with her own grandchildren. I actually became the grandma that she used to be to her grandchildren. Yes.
A new role, huh?
Yes, yes, yes. They called me Auntie Granny.
It's very logical.
Yes, yes, yes. But it was hurtful to us all. It's actually hurtful now to sit here and remember and how we felt seeing the changes in her.
Yeah. Now, you are a lawyer yourself, retired,
That's correct.
in a different practice of law.
Right.
When you saw the lawyers that represented CVS and what they did, and the fact they didn't care for your sister whatsoever, what went through your mind? Were you extremely angry?
I thought it was shameful. That's the word that comes to mind to me, because here's this person that was injured in your store
Through no fault of her own.
through no fault of her own, through the negligence of one of your employees. It's not that she was just in the store and something happened to her. There was an individual that caused this chair to fall and hit her in the head. And so you don't want to be responsible for changing someone's life, totally and completely changing her life. And I remember Mildred saying something to me. She was saying, if they could give me my life back, the one I had before I got injured, I wouldn't take a dime from them.
I wouldn't accept any of the money that I was awarded by a jury of your peers, right?
Not one dime.
Yeah. And they awarded, what,
I think it was 4.6.
$4.6 million because the jury was pissed off, weren't they?
It was obvious that Mildred her life had been tremendously impacted by this injury. And I think once the family testified, the doctors testified, my mother, who was 94, testified. She cried. Mildred's children testified. We could all testify to the person that she used to be. And then this version of a person that we have now that's totally different. She wasn't able to sit in a room where there was daylight, trying to visit her father, who was totally incapacitated. I remember seeing her sitting by his bedside with her coat over her head because there was daylight in the room. And she was having so much pain in her head. And that was the part that we all suffered, is that she was in pain. And she's still in pain to this day. A headache every day. Can you imagine that? Every day for 7 or 8 years? I can't even imagine it.
Do you take medication for that?
Yes, I'm on medication. I am under the care of a neurologist and have been all this time, who has tried so many different medications to ease the pain in my head. And so far, we haven't found one that would take the pain away.
Are you having a pain right now in your
Oh,
head?
yes, I live with it daily.
Where is the pain?
The pain is it's usually my entire head, but there are times where I get these shooting kind of pains that sort of be centered back in this area. And I have earaches and the ringing in the ears and all of that. So I'm in pain daily.
Do you sleep okay?
I don't sleep very well. I maybe sleep 2 hours, wake up, stay up for a while, sleep 2 hours, wake up. I don't like to dream because when I dream, they become so vivid. I tend to act out in them. And I hallucinate very bad. They thought it was a medication. They changed the medication. So it wasn't medication. I still hallucinate and I see things. But now I have become so accustomed to them that I know they're not real. Otherwise, oh my God, I can't imagine how I'd be if, I really believed in the hallucinations that I see all the time.
Just curious, do you go shopping?
No, I was one of those couponers who would go in the store and buy a whole bunch of stuff and they would give me money back.
Yeah.
And I had a storehouse or stockhouse in my house where my relatives would come and shop. Of course, free of charge. I wouldn't charge them anything because I'd gotten so much free. And I would donate to my church's storehouse for the senior citizens and all of that. But I can't do it anymore. I can't go in the store and concentrate. And even the music they play in the store would drive me out of there. So I can't coupon anymore.
So what do you do all day now, these days?
Well, I did pick up, I'm going to call it a hobby, and I think it was to keep my mind regulated, which is something my son got me into, and he used to sell things on eBay. So I watched him, and he showed me how to do some things. So I did that for a while, but that really helped me to focus more. It helped me to be able to multitask because I couldn't multitask anymore. I could only do one thing at a time. Whenever I would cook, I still do this. I sit by the stove while I cook. Otherwise, I would be burning up everything every day because my short-term memory is so bad.
You live by yourself.
I live alone right now, yes.
Your sister's trying to move in, though.
She's right around the corner.
Wow, you have been through a lot. A lot of people don't realize, what angers me the most is these corporations. They will deny. It's the insurance companies selling. Deny, and they don't care about the human being. I was looking at, it's only been really since, let's say, the 50s or 60s that workers, or customers with Ralph Nader, for example, with Public Citizen in the 60s, started being more concerned and protective of, the common everyday average person. You gotta fight for it. You gotta fight for it. Anything else either one of you want to add?
I think there needs to be more attention towards head injuries in themselves and people who have concussions. And I think that there is some improvement because of what the football players are going through now and all of that. But it needs to be spotlighted more. Just simple individuals just like me who went into a store one day and came out with a traumatic brain injury.
And then that's disputed by the experts on their side, right? Which adds insult to injury.
Yes, and even though I may look normal, I'm a long way from normal. It's an injury that you cannot see. I don't have any broken bones. I don't have any scars or bruises, but it's there. And I'd like people to pay more attention to head injury cases and people who have traumatic brain injuries, because I personally think that's a lot. It has a lot to do with why they're criminals and why jails are filled because people have these injuries and don't even know they have them.
How about yourself, Sharon?
Well, I just want to say that I'm very proud of my sister. She's come a long way from the beginning of having to write notes, to remember to close her door when she left her home, to cut her car off. So she's come a long way. And I'm very proud that she's here and wants to spotlight the traumatic brain injuries, how people are affected how their lives change. And there's nothing that you can do about it.
One last thing. Your lawyer, Bobby Raitt. What do you think of him?
Oh, he's wonderful. I'll never, ever forget Bobby and what he did for me and how sympathetic he was to my injury and how personable he was. I was like, I'm a human. I'm a person and not just this person who was coming for a service.
Right. You didn't even realize the extent of your injuries, did you? Because I think before the show you said you were willing to settle the case.
At one point, because I didn't know. And then when all these things started happening to me, actually I sent my sister here an email, and I think I titled it, Just in Case. Just in case, this is what's going on with me. And I had this list of everything that I was feeling because at that time I had not been diagnosed with a traumatic brain injury. So.
And since you're a lawyer and what Bobby did for your sister, what do you think?
I love Bobby. He's magnificent. He says that I am the reason that he decided to pursue the trial and not settle the case. But I knew he could do it. And that's what I kept telling him. I said, you can do it. You can do it. With the help of all of the family and his great legal skills, the jury was convinced over and above what he asked them for. I love Bobby.
Well, on that note, I want to thank both of you for being on the show and getting this message out. Hope to see you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. You can get more information about our guest and the issues at insiderexclusive.com.